Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series, we're creating a Django and React dashboard app in which users can see the database data visualized in different types of charts. This is not the first video in this series. We've already done 9 before, in which we covered the basic setup of Django and React. I showed you how you can get your database data from the backend to the frontend, and we've explored different visuals such as the pie chart, a donut chart, a stacked bar chart, and also a line chart. In this video, we're going to continue, and I'm going to show you how you can use a combination chart, where one of the series is displayed as a bar and the other one as a line. And in the end, it's going to look something like this, where we display a data set that we also used in the previous video that displays the quantities per branch and per product line in a Combi-Chart, where the quantities of the branch A are defined as the bars, and the quantities from branches B and C are visualized as a different type, being a line chart. And to do that, we're going to be following 4 steps. We're going to start by picking a combination chart example from the Material UI documentation. Then we're going to make that chart work with some example data, and we're going to parameterize it so that we can use it from our dashboard 1 page. Then as a last step, we're going to populate the chart with our database data so everything is connected and we see the results. So let's get started. And the first step is finding an example in the Material UI documentation. Right now I'm on the documentation of MUI X charts. And if we go to the left-hand menu and we scroll down to common features, there is something called composition. And the composition page shows multiple ways to compose charts in Material UI. You can already see right here that they have a few options that combine different visualizations with each other. For example, here we have a scatter plot and a line. And also if we go up a little bit more, we have a more basic version which has a bar and a line. And this is the example that I want to use. Now, the purpose of this example is to show that a chart container can be responsive. So by checking and unchecking the box right here, you can see that the container of the chart is changing. Now we are going to take the code for this particular visual, but we don't have any need for this thing here. So we need to make some changes to make it work in our project. So I'm going to click on Show Code and then make sure that it's on JavaScript. And now I'm going to copy over the source so that we have it all there. So now we are back inside of our code, and similarly as in the last videos, I'm going to go to the frontend folder, then we're going to go to source, components, and then charts. And in there, I'm going to be creating a new file called Combi-Chart.jsx. And we can just paste in the code that we have just received on Material UI. And instead of calling this basic composition, I'm going to be calling it my Combi-Chart. And let's save that. Now let's first make sure that it's actually visible inside of our frontend so we can see what we are working with. So to arrange that, we need to go to our dashboard1.jsx page. And on the top, we're going to be importing that file. So we're going to be importing my Combi-Chart from charts/Combi-Chart. Then we're going to go down, and in those boxes where we place the different charts, we can go and copy over the existing parameters that we have from the previous videos. So for the icon, we can just leave it as it is for now. In the title, we can say quantities per product line per branch, because that is what we will be doing. We're going to be using the data that we already used in the previous video. And then as the chart, we can then say that this is going to be my Combi-Chart. And let's make sure that this closes nicely. And of course, we need to change the parameters to make sure that it's icon 2, title 2, and chart 2. And let's now save this and see what it looks like inside of our frontend. And to do that, we of course need to start our frontend. So for the frontend, we can do cd into the frontend folder and then do npm run dev. And I'm also going to open another terminal right here because we also need to start the backend server by doing cd into the backend folder. Do venv/scripts/activate to start the virtual environment. And then we do Python manage.py run server. And now let's check out the results. And the results have now loaded in our frontend. And you can see that we have the exact same example being inside of this box right here. And when we click use responsive container, it becomes a little bit bigger. And when we uncheck it, it becomes smaller. Now, the first thing what I want to do is make sure that this box around it goes away, and also that we don't have the options for making it responsive and unresponsive. But for this example, I always want to use the responsive version. So let's check out how they arrange that and modify our code so we have it like that. So we're going to go back to the Combi-Chart.jsx file, and in there they have a few things listed to make sure that it all becomes responsive. You can see in the code right here that the entirety of the code is inside of a container. And this container is being determined conditionally because when we check the checkbox, it's going to change from a responsive chart container to a chart container. Now we always want to use the responsive chart container. So I'm just going to copy over that word right here and paste it in the place where container was. And then also we need to go all the way down and say that container also needs to be as the end command right here. Then, of course, we no longer need the container overall. And actually, we can also delete the constant of isResponsive and setIsResponsive because we're not going to be doing that stuff with checking the checkbox and making sure that that all works. And that also makes sure that we can then delete the sizing props because we only need to add sizing if our container is not responsive. And in the part here, we also have a form control label which handles that checkbox, and that one can also go. Then I see some things about a paper which does some elevation and those kind of things. So we're also going to delete the paper so that all we have left is the box at the top and then the responsive chart container right there. And the last thing we also need to get rid of is this sizing props right here, because we actually deleted that constant. So let's save this. Now the last thing that we also need to define is the height. And how it works with the responsive chart container is that if you don't define the height and the width inside of this container, it's going to take the height and the width of the parent. Now, you can see on the top here that this box has a width of 100%. So our chart container is also going to be 100%. The height we also need to specify in here, but the height we need to do in pixels. So for now, I'm going to set it to 300 pixels. And I think that concludes all of the changes that we need to make to this code. And we're now in our frontend, and you can see that our quantities per product line per branch are now successfully implemented. And we see a nice looking combination chart on our dashboard. The next step is making sure that this chart actually looks nice, with the data being in the same structure as what we will have in the end. Now for the final version of this chart, we're going to be using the same data that we see in the quantities per product line per branch right here. And if we go to the dashboard one page inside of our application, we can quickly put the data in the console to see what it looks like. So over here, we have the branch data, which is being stored in my product branch data. So I'm going to change the console.log and put in the my product branch data and say my product branch data right there as well. And that enables us to see this data structure in the console. So we're now back, and I'm going to inspect it right here and then go to our console. And on the bottom here, we can see the structure of this data. Now, what it looks like is we have a product line underscore name. So we have different product lines in the different rows. And then for each of the branches that we have a column that displays the value. So we have quantity of branch A, B, and C. And that goes on like this for all of the product categories. So what I'm now going to do is make sure that this chart works with this structure as well. So inside of my Combi-Chart.jsx file, I've defined a constant called data and made sure that we have the product line and the quantities as columns. And what I want to do now is make sure that the example works in the structure with the data like this. Now we've also worked with data sets in the last few videos. And the first thing that we need to define inside of this chart container is the data set that we're going to be working with. Because if you define data set and then say that it's going to be data, you can actually use the names of the columns to populate the different other options inside of your charts. So now that we've told our chart container that we have a data set, we need to change the way that the series and the x-axis is displaying the data, because right now it's just using those hard-coded values. And let's get started with the x-axis to make sure that we see the correct labels. Now we're going to be changing this one slightly. We're going to replace the data that there is right now, and we're going to provide a data key. And this means that we're going to pass in the name of a column inside of our dataset, and the values of that column are going to be used on the x-axis. So if I now go to the top and I change this to product line, because that's the column name of the product line, we should see all of the product lines on the x-axis of the chart. And now when we get back, we indeed see the different product lines as the different options on the chart. So that's working nicely. Now the next thing we need to do is also make sure that the series match the data of the x-axis. So in there, we need to reformat the way that we're going to define our series. Because in our case, we want to not supply type and the data, but we're going to get rid of data right there. And also over here, we're going to be referring to a data key. So in there, we can say that we want to have the values of quantity branch A as the first series. And the type of visualization that we want to see for that is we want it to be a bar. And this is going to make sure that quantity branch A shows up as the bars inside of the chart. Now what we can also do is add a label just to make it look a little bit nicer. And in there we can say that this is the quantity of branch A and then do a comma. Now we can do the same thing for branch B, but for branch B we're going to make it a line chart. So we can again copy over this whole thing and just replace with what is there now. And then what I want to do is I want to be replacing the data key with the quantity of branch B, so the other column that we have inside of the data, and also set that the label is quantity branch B. But then the type is not going to be bar, but the type is going to be equal to line. And that should make sure that the quantities of branch B are displayed as a line opposed to a bar. So let's check out the results. And right now we are back inside of our frontend, and you can indeed see that the quantities of branch A are displayed as the bars and the quantities of branch B are displayed as a line. So this seems to be working just fine. Now, of course, we want this to work with our actual database data. And to arrange that, we can add some parameters. Now, you already recognize this same thing from the previous videos that we have done, for example, for the stacked bar chart, where we simply put the series as a parameter and also the dataset as a parameter. And the same thing even goes for the x-axis, which can also be parameterized. So that's what we're going to be doing for the Combi-Chart, because that allows us to pass in a dataset from our dashboard 1 page, opposed to defining it hard-coded in here. And that makes the chart much more reusable. So we're just going to get rid of the constant of data for now. And actually, let's also go to the top and remove all of the imports that we're not using, just to clean up a little bit. And then we're going to be adding some parameters. Now, the dataset is defined as data. So we're going to add a prop in here that states that if we want to use this function, we need to provide a prop called data. And then we can pass that data to this chart. Then the next thing that we want to make a parameter as well are the series. So we're going to be deleting everything inside of the series for now and say that series is going to be equal to my series. And we also add that on the top in the function as a prop. Then the last thing where we also want to define is the data key. And this is actually the data key of the x-axis. And this is going to be the column that will be used as the values on the x-axis. So in here, we just say x column. And let's copy that over and also add that to the prop section of the function. Now, if we want this to work on our dashboard 1, we need to go to that page and supply this chart with the data prop, with the my series prop and the x column prop. And then that information can be used by the chart to work its magic on our front end. So I'm just going to copy over these right here so I don't forget it. And then we're going to go to our dashboard 1 page, to the place where we highlighted that we want to see the Combi-Chart. So now if we want to use this function of Combi-Chart that we just adjusted, we need to provide 3 props. We need to say that data is going to be equal to the product branch data. And let's go up and make sure that we copy that correctly. So we want the my product branch data to be the data that is going to be displayed inside of our chart. Then we're going to go and define the different series in the my series prop. And in there, we can just define the same thing as we just did and also in the previous videos, where we provide a constant with the exact information that needs to be on the chart. So I can copy over this constant of my country series. And I'm just going to call this my product branch series. And let's now pass this inside of this prop right here. Now, what we need to provide in this series is the data key of the different things that we want to see, but we also need to tell it what the label is going to be, and as an additional one, what the type is going to be. Because what we just did in the other file is that we defined it whether it's a bar or a line. Now, if we take a look at the data structure that we had inside of our frontend, you can see that the quantities are defined as quantity branch A, quantity branch B, and quantity branch C. So I'm just going to copy over this name, and we're going to create a series for each of these value columns. So the first one, the data key or the column that we want to see, is the quantity of branch A. The label is going to be quantity branch A, and the type is going to be equal to bar, because I want this first series to be displayed as a bar on the chart. Next, we can then do quantity branch B, and also then say that this is going to be the quantity of branch B. And then as the type, we can say that this is going to be a line chart. And we can even do the same thing for quantity of branch C, where we also say that this is the quantity of the branch C, and then also the type. Let's also give it a line in this example. And this should result in us getting 3 different series displayed, 2 of which are going to be a line and 1 that are going to be a bar. Now, the last thing that we also need to display is what is going to be on the x-axis. Now, if we take a look at the data, you see that we have something called product line underscore underscore name, and that are the values that we want to see on the x-axis. So we're going to go down and put in the last of the props. So x column is going to be equal to the value of product line underscore underscore name. And let's now see what we see if we go to the front end. And we now indeed see our nice looking chart where we have the different products categories and then lines for the branches A, branches B, and branches C. So that's already looking quite good. Now, the thing that I want to change here is make sure that we have all of the labels displayed, because some of them fall away due to the long names. I also want to delete the x-axis, and it would be nice if we actually get a legend on the top. So let's figure that out. So let's make sure that we first see the legend. Now, to do that, we need to import something because it's not actually included by default. So on the top of this page, we're going to be saying import, and then we do charts legend. And that comes from @mui/xcharts, but actually we need to then do /charts legend like this. And then all we need to do to make sure that the labels are showing up is paste that in on the bottom here as a block and then save it. And now when we get back to our front end, you can see that we have these labels being included again. So that's already quite nice. Next thing we need to get rid of is the x-axis right here, because in this case, I don't really want to have it right there. Now, deleting that is actually quite easy. We just need to remove the label from chart x-axis. So the label can just be nothing, but we still want to maintain the position and the axis ID there. And now when we get back, we don't see a label right there. So that's also fine. Last thing we want to do is make sure that all of those products are showing up in our axis labels. Now, to do that, we can actually borrow it from what we did in the previous video for this chart right here. So that was actually the stacked bar chart. So we're going to go to the stacked bar chart.jsx. And there you can see that what we did was we applied some styling on the x-axis. So we stated that we are going to change the tick label style, where we placed it in an angle and also made the font a lot smaller. So I'm going to copy over this styling element from here. And then we're going to go to the Combi-Chart and go to our x-axis. And we, after the ID, add the tick label style. And the tick label style is going to place it at an angle. Make sure that it starts at the beginning and have a font size of 10. And let's save that. And now you can see that we have them very small underneath our chart. So that's looking quite nice. Now, of course, having combination charts inside of your app looks really nice. But I would still recommend to not go for this particular option. The reason for that is that you lose quite some interactive elements. Because in all of my other charts by default, it's quite easy to show where we are, what the values are on certain points. And just by hovering over and checking all of that stuff, it's quite easy to see what the data is. But this one seems to be rendered more like an image, and when we hover over it, it doesn't really provide any information. So if you want to visualize something like this, of course, it looks quite nice and it might be very beneficial if you want to visualize something like actuals versus budget and forecast. But if you're just comparing quantities across branches, it might be better to do something like this or create an area chart. And that is actually all for this video. In this video, I showed you how you can create a Combi-Chart in your React.js frontend. This was actually the last video in this series for now. I did see some recommendations on using other chart libraries for future videos, so it could be that I bring out a little bit more of an extensive video on how to add that to this project. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.